Hello beautiful people, it's Steph here if you don't already know, and on this channel I just talk about all things careers and all things lifestyle. And in today's video I am going to be giving you all the tea about my international secondment. So I asked on my Instagram, please do give me a follow if you're not already. I said, what do you guys want to know? And I got loads of questions in, so I'm going to run through those questions in this video. If you like this type of content, please do make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and let's get straight into this. Okay, so first question we've got is, what did you put as your business case to go on secondment? So I think it's probably best for me to actually just explain a little bit about how the secondment process works at my particular firm. So at the firm that I'm at, we actually have a guaranteed secondment. And what that means is that for anybody who wants to go, there is definitely an opportunity to go on secondment in your fourth seat. Now, obviously due to the pandemic, sometimes the secondment may have to be virtual. As you can see, I'm actually out here in the US, so I'm in a physical secondment, and the majority of people in my cohort are on a physical secondment at the moment. And those who are not, I think are just not on secondment. So it's not that they're doing a virtual secondment, they're just not going for different reasons. So I didn't actually have to put a business case forward. Now, I do know some people, so I had a friend, for example, at a Magic Circle firm who did go on secondment as well, also in their fourth seat, and they have this kind of like bidding process. So the way you would have to do it is you'd have to strategically think, that the fact that you want to go on secondment in your fourth seat, make sure that you have enough, I don't know if it's coins or what they use to bid, but whatever it is that they use to bid, make sure that you have enough of those so that you can put those down when it's time for you to go on secondment, if that makes sense. So that's something to think about if you go to that type of firm. There's other firms as well where it's not guaranteed, but as far as I know, people have gone on it. Basically what I can say is that I know quite a few people who have gone on the international secondment, so it's not that unheard of, but I didn't actually have to put down a business case. So I hope that answers that question. Second question I have is selection/allocation process, living arrangements and scope of work in a foreign office. Cool. So yeah, I guess I could just go through what the actual process was like. So the way it works for us is that around, I think 3.5 months or something like that into our third seat, we kind of were just sent our options. And we have to pick by practice area. So practice area examples are things like, saying you want to do a corporate seat or capital markets or project finance or etc., things like that. And then within each practice area, there are different locations. So for example, corporate might have had, and I don't actually remember, so I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but they might have had like Dubai, I don't know, where else did corporate have? Paris, New York, I don't know, like random locations, right? So each practice area would have had maybe a couple of different locations. Some had like 5, some only had like 2. It just varied. And the way that the locations are picked, that's actually nothing to do with us. That's just all to do with business needs. So graduate recruitment kind of goes out to the different offices and just says, hey, it's like secondment rotation time. Basically, where do you kind of need people to be? And then depending on what offices say when they come back to us, they can then give us a list and say, okay, yeah, like the Tokyo office, for example, is looking for someone or whatever. So every year it can actually vary, but that's how it worked. So once that is then sent out, we then had about a week, I think it was a week, to just decide what we wanted to do and submit our application, quote unquote. And the way the application worked was that we just had to rank the practice areas in order of preference, so from 1 to 6. And then we could also write a business case as to, and I say business case because I know before I said we didn't have to write a business case, but like we didn't have to write a business case in the sense that this was a guaranteed thing, if that makes sense. Like I was definitely going on secondment, so I didn't have to write a business case to go, but I wrote a business case to just explain why I picked the order of preferences that I picked. So my business case was basically just kind of like, I really like emerging markets work, which is something that I've maintained from the beginning, right from when I was applying to the firm, to be honest. That's always what I've said I wanted to do. I've always kind of liked this kind of finance work. I'm in project finance, if I haven't already said. So this is kind of what I want to do in my fourth seat, because I think it will really tie together all of my training, etc. And I was really fortunate. I got my first choice because project finance was my first choice, and I got that, so I'm really happy. Obviously I'm out here in the US, I'm in Houston, so I'm really happy about that as well. But just to reiterate, we don't pick by location, we pick by practice area. So that's the first part, that's the selection, and that's the allocation process as well, I believe. Second part of the question was the living arrangements. So the way that kind of worked, to be honest, so there was a trainee before, I mean, like 2 intakes before me, who did this exact seat, so did project finance in Houston. So I reached out to that well, they're not a trainee anymore, they're an associate now, but I reached out to them and was just kind of like, hey, I'm going to the same place you were going to, so like, just give me the tea basically, like, where did you live, what was it like, blah, 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 blah. So they sent me their accommodation and it looks really cool. So to be honest, I was just kind of lazy. I was just like, I just want to stay in their accommodation because I don't know Houston, I don't know America, I don't really have the energy or the strength to be researching different neighborhoods, different areas, blah, 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 which is what I would ordinarily do if I was even just traveling somewhere for holiday, but definitely if I'm moving somewhere to live there, I would do all of that sort of research, right? But to kind of like bypass some of that, I was just like, let me just go to somewhere that someone else has already lived. So that was initially what I was going to do. And then a service provider. So my office actually, like, because they give everybody accommodation, they have service providers who kind of run this process for them. So the service provider kind of just sent me different options. So I looked at those options, but that's all paid for, rent's paid for, utilities are paid for, etc., etc. So I just like buy groceries and cook and stuff like that, but everything else is paid for, which is great. Scope of work in a foreign office. I think, to be honest, and maybe this is just me, but I have kind of spoken about this a lot of times, but you can be the driver of your career, right? And in terms of scope of work, I think it's more so about what you say you want to get involved in, and then people will kind of work with you to do that. So for example, before I came out here, I actually set up a call with my now supervisor and was just kind of like, you know, just want to introduce myself because I know you're going to be my supervisor, want to hear a bit more about the work that you do, blah, blah, blah. And they just asked, they were like, okay, so like, you know, this is obviously your 4th seat, like what kind of work are you interested in? What do you want to do? And I just said, you know, well, I mean, I've done the finance side of things. And obviously I know project finance is a bit different to debt finance, but in terms of like the role of a trainee, the finance work is pretty similar, right? I still have to do a CP checklist, I still have to run the CPs, all that kind of stuff. So I would be quite keen to actually look at the project documents because that's not something I've done before. And he was like, okay, sure, like that's definitely something we can get you involved in. So in terms of scope of work, I've definitely had that availability to kind of just say, you know, this is what I want to focus on. And obviously to the extent that support is needed in other areas that I haven't expressed an interest in, I will obviously do that work. But yeah, I'm basically just kind of doing what I want to do in terms of shaping my career in that way. So I hope that answers the scope of work in a foreign office question. In terms of the jurisdiction of work you do, because I know this is something that a lot of people do ask about. So typically, if like UK law stuff, so English law stuff comes in, then you would be like the first point of call, right? Because we are training to be English law qualified solicitors. But because I'm in the US, you know, sometimes the nature of the work will be that I do have to review things which are US law governed in some way, shape or form. So obviously I would just kind of review from a sense check perspective. I would obviously ask more questions because I have not done any training in US law governed documents, all that sort of stuff. But you tend to find, especially when you've been doing this for long enough, that a lot of things are actually the same across different legal systems. So it can be a bit easy, I guess, to pick up like where problems are and stuff like that. But yeah, I hope that answers the scope of work question. Next question we had was, how easy was it to get the secondment? How are they helping with living costs? So yeah, I have already answered that in this previous question, but I'll just reiterate. Very easy for me to get the secondment because it's a guaranteed secondment. So it was more a thing of like, I would have to opt out if I actually didn't want to do it, if that makes sense. And then cost of living. Oh, actually, the other thing I didn't mention is that you get like a prorated salary depending on where you go to. So I'm actually being given an additional amount every day because of like the cost of living in America is a little bit higher than what it would be for me in the UK. So I'm getting additional money for that, as well as obviously them paying my accommodation and stuff like that as well. So it's quite good, like it's quite helpful. Yeah. Okay, how long are you going to be there for? So this international secondment is for the duration of the seat. A seat is 6 months at my particular firm, so I will be here for 6 months. Next question, and actually final question, is why did you choose America? Oh, lovely question. Well, I guess first of all, I didn't actually choose America in terms of like putting it down on my application, right? But in my head, I was kind of thinking about America, or well, I had a few options of where I was thinking about, but America was definitely one of them. A few different reasons. First of all, emerging markets work, like I mentioned at the beginning, is something that I'm really, really passionate about. It's something that I want to do. And once you get into this thing, you kind of realize, but different locations focus on different types of work. So for example, in the Houston office, they do a lot of Latin America work, right? Which is really, really interesting. That's something that I just haven't seen or touched in London. So it's something new to me. I also just didn't really want to stay in Europe. That was just my own personal kind of thing, like nothing to do with work. I just wanted to be out of Europe. So I was kind of looking at like the Asias, the Middle East and America, right? But then looking at the practice areas that I wanted to do, which was project finance, it then narrowed it down for me to America or Asia. So in my narrative, I did kind of say, look, that's kind of where I would prefer to be based off of the type of work I want to do, because in America or Asia, I would be able to have like more direct access to that emerging markets work. Whereas in Europe, I mean, yes, we do still do emerging markets work in the European offices. So for example, in the London office, I have definitely worked on emerging market stuff. Like, I'm not saying I haven't, but just from what I've heard from speaking to different people, the nature of the work in this particular office, for example, it's more like, I don't know, 90-10 or 80-20 or something like that. So like, you're doing a lot of emerging markets work, which is what I wanted to do. So yeah, that is basically why I chose America. But thank you for sending all of your questions about my international secondment. I'm really, really excited to share this journey with you. If you like this kind of content, please do make sure that you like, comment and subscribe, and I'll be back again soon with another video.